So I'm Jari-Pekka Kaleva, Managing Director of the European Games Developer Federation. And Oleg kindly invited me to speak today about the state of the games industry in 2024. And as you all know, it has been quite a rough year. So the theme or motto for this year seems to be "Let's survive." But before that, let's first. Oh, sorry, wrong screen. No. Talk about EGDF. So EGDF represents 23 trade associations from 22 different European countries. So we are basically lobbying for the game developers on the European level, as well as we are aggregating data on the state of the games industry. And furthermore, we are facilitating access to a number of the EU projects, etc., in order to keep European games industry in the map of the European decision makers. What we focus on is building a digital single market area where game developer studios flourish. And in practice, this means that we focus on ensuring access to funding, access to talent, and access to the top of the value chain for the game developer studios. And of course, all this is based on understanding the state of the games markets. So, let's start about the state of the industry. In order to really reflect where we are at the moment, it's of course important to recall what has happened during the not so happy 2020s. Of course, in the beginning of the decade, we had COVID. And of course, on that side, the trade associations collaborated quite a lot on the knowledge sharing and facilitating the games industry to access the different support instruments, etc. And of course, in the beginning, it looks like COVID will be a huge crisis for the games industry, but from the market-wise, markets were booming. However, it was a really, really challenging time for the game creators, people working for the studios. The mental burden was really high for many of us, and it was really, really tough 1 or 2 years. And when the COVID restrictions started to move away in 2022, it looks like we are returning normal. There was lots of money in the markets. Everything looks really good. And then the war started. So when the Russian tanks rolled over the Ukrainian border, of course, European Games Industry Trade Associations were helping the war refugees from Ukraine, especially on the games industry side, to relocate to different countries, and at the same time try to help the studios to navigate in the new reality where the interest rates were rising and everything was really, really uncertain. And from that point forward, things have been even more rough for the industry. So in 2023, it looked like the dip, like the games industry, game markets reached their tipping point during the COVID, and there was a slight decrease for the first time in the game markets. However, all the predictions will say that we would be back on the track. However, what really, really hit the games industry in 2023 was that the investment rates dropped by 75%. So, of course, you have to keep in mind that 2021, 2022 were like crazy years for the games industry. There was so much money available for the game developer studios as risk investment that it was something that we have never really experienced. And although we went down a lot, it was a huge crash compared to previous years. Still, we are now, the investment hasn't completely stopped. But many of the challenges we are facing now are coming from this fact that there is investment winter at the moment. And when we look to the bankruptcies, we don't really have the data yet from 2023. All we have is an indication from the general ICT company data that many of the games industry studios are registered in the statistics. So there has been a huge spike in the bankruptcies intersector into EU level, and unfortunately, Game Opera Studios are part of that trend most likely. So we have already heard a lot of studio closures, and many, and there has been, as we all know, huge layoffs in the industry. So, yeah, 2023 was not a great year for the industry. So EGDF has been tracking the state of the industry in many terms, and we are currently collecting data from 2022. The reason for this is that it takes first half a year for our members after the financial year has ended to actually collect the data. And then usually the reports are published on the autumn, and then the EGDF aggregates the data from these reports. And so it means that there is always 1.5 year delay in our data collection, unavoidably. But it looks like the 2022 was still a great year for the European games industry. The number of studios increased, number of turnover increased, and number of people employed by the industry increased. Most likely in 2023, there has been a drop. How big? We don't know that yet. Next year, we will have the data in our hands. But yeah, 2023 was a really, really challenging year. So where are we at now, 2024? So, as said, brace yourself. 2024 is going to be a difficult year. First of all, games market are becoming increasingly saturated. They were saturated already before. They are now even more saturated, as on many platforms, the same number of new games are published in a day as were published in a year 10 years ago. And there has been so many games that were funded during the 2021 and 2022 investment boom that are now entering the markets, that the competition is huge. There are some big winners in this game. If you are going to be a hit, you have a hit game in your hand, yeah, we're still going to make a lot of money, but we are going to see also many high profiles failures, and many studios that are struggling to survive in silence. So the success seems to be polarizing again and squeezing the middle of the market. Then there is sky-high market access barriers on the mobile game markets that has been the driver of the growth in the European games industry for years. So after restrictions on the gatekeeper platforms, the gatekeeper platform set a lot of restrictions on access to data, especially on Apple side. Mobile marketing user acquisition became really highly expensive, and that has been a huge challenge for the industry. And many companies are now struggling to reach the players. Hopefully, the Digital Markets Act introduced by the European Union this year will change the situation, but that remains to be seen. Yeah. Then there was the end of the subscription platform hype. There were lots of hopes that this would increase the competition. And for a while, many people were able to close quite nice deals on the subscription side. However, now those days are over. It's really, really hard to access that markets. NFT hype, cryptocurrency hype, that's gone now. However, let's see how the next generation of crypto games or NFT games are going to survive in the markets, because the first generation games were quite bad, but the next ones will be better and find their market segment. Difficult times, lots of games, lots of studios struggling. At the same time, of course, the publisher and investor expectations have increased a lot. You always need to have a lot of data demonstrating that your game has a potential. They are not really willing to take the risk. And because of that, there is a huge investment winter at the moment. And when you combine that with austerity measures, a number of the EU member states have introduced on the public funding, it makes the situation of the companies even harder. And it didn't really help that those who had used loan funding as a bridge funding for the difficult times now have to pay much higher interest rates than before. Like for years, the loan funding was basically free money. Now it's not. And also the IPO hype that was really high in many of the countries is gone now. And basically this means that the runway is ending for many of the startups. So we had raised a few millions in 2021 or 2022. Now you need a second round of funding, and it's really, really hard to succeed on doing that. Some succeed, many don't. We have seen a lot of studio closures already. And many of the studios have tried to move to subcontractor markets, but that's extremely hard market to survive. And if you have done B2C games before and then you try to move to B2B side, it's a completely different business model. So we have seen layoffs, of course, as out from that. In many EU member states, also the brain drain in the games industry is quite big. So people are relocating to other locations where there are more jobs available, or they are working remotely for those companies on the other countries. And that, of course, makes the situation for the local companies harder to find in research talent. And in the end, everyone is also afraid that some kind of World War III would be starting and everything is gloomy and dark. So hopefully not, but it's not a surprise that game developer communities around Europe are, well, more or less pessimistic at the moment. But it's important to keep in mind that the level of the pessimism really is culturally connected in many cases, or then also the situation of the different games industry ecosystems are quite different. Only 12% of the games industry companies expected the industry to grow in 2024, so the Germans are quite cynical on this side. Meanwhile, UK game studios are actually a bit optimistic. They have the startup spirit and entrepreneurial spirit that, well, things might be getting better in 2024. So although it has been hard times, it doesn't mean that hope would be completely gone. And the reason for that in Europe is that in the end, Europe is a great place to be during these difficult times. First of all, European companies have always been among the forerunners on exploiting the new opportunities and disruptions, especially countries like Finland that have lots of investment in R&D experimentation, R&D funding from Business Finland. And even though the Finnish government is now cutting from everywhere else, they are still keeping the R&D funding on the top of their priority list and are actually investing even more on that. So we have seen a lot of the companies experimenting with AI lately, or NFTs, cryptos, VR, AR, etc., etc. So there are a lot of the interesting startups building something novel, something new that hopefully will lead to next success stories emerging from all the European countries over the next years when the markets get bigger. And the game markets themselves are back on the growth track. Said in the beginning. It's people are again making money in the games. Unfortunately, a lot of that money goes to big studios, big hits, but even the smaller players are able to survive in these markets if they reach their players. And it was a really, really good situation that we had those 2 fat years before the crisis really hit the games industry, because many of the European companies were in really, really good shape to enter this difficult 2023 and difficult 2024. So it could have been much worse. And actually many of the studios have the war chest to survive another 2 years. Hopefully in 2025, things will be much better. And something we have seen is that Europe has a great talent pool. So for years and years, one of the main complaints we received from the studios was that there is a huge challenges in finding the skilled employees. And what we have seen all around Europe, that those who can are recruiting like crazy at the moment. There is finally lots of this senior talent available in the job markets. So Europe has a great talent pool. Europe also has a great game education. So not only we have great senior talent, but we have a education system that is able to produce one of the best junior talents globally on this continent. And that, of course, is a great advantage for growing the business in Europe. And thirdly, Europe is also still a really, really attractive location for the foreign talents. So while Europe is struggling, situation in many other countries is even worse. And many of the people are seeing Europe as a place where to relocate and with their families start working for the game developer studios. So we are still able to attract the best global talent here. And we do have still many great game developer studios in this country and this continent. There are many of them who are struggling at the moment, but many of them are very, very likely to survive. We have seen many closures, but even more studios are surviving. And at the same time, many of the European investors have money at the moment. Just before these hard times really hit the industry, there were also a lot of exits in the games industry, and many of these people are now waiting for the better times to start investing in the games. So we have finally the European capital waiting for the better times. So when the better times come, investors are ready, they have money, and hopefully that will lead to another small investment way to the startups that have been struggling so much during these 2 years. And Europe has great public funding instruments. So even though there has been a lot of cuts, Finland has one of the best R&D instruments on the globe. Germany and France have great support instruments for game productions. Sweden has a great SME support structures on the local level, etc., etc. And that really helps game developer studios to survive through these difficult times when access to private funding is particularly challenging. So it's difficult, but Europe is the place to be. And in the end, difficult times make the best entrepreneurs. So perhaps it was a bit of a necessary reality check for the industry that it's not just easy access to money. Sometimes you have to work really hard, make great games, and find the best talents in order to survive. And these kind of difficult times create great games, great entrepreneurs, great game developer studios. It's not easy, it's difficult, but hopefully also something great will emerge from these difficult times. So, what are the game developer studios through the trade associations doing at the moment to help your struggling game developers and game developer studios? First of all, what we have identified, one of the key areas is focus on the students and startups. Those are the two area groups, so the startup entrepreneurs and the students that are struggling the most in the current situation. This means that we are, through the trade association, encouraging the internship programs, trying to find more public funding for the startups, etc., etc. And of course, access to public funding and access to funding in general is really, really important at the moment. And all the help we can now provide for the companies to get their second round of funding or the first round of funding from starting new companies is crucial. And what we really need is some kind of strategic approach on growth. EU is at the moment itself planning to build a specific strategy for video games industry. EGDF is doing its own strategies. Many of our member associations are building their strategies, because what now is needed is very targeted action in order to help the local game industry ecosystems to grow and survive through these difficult times. And I'm certain we will survive. And most likely, we hope, and our goal is that games industry in Europe will be back on the growth track in 2025, hopefully. And from that year onward, we will again see the growth we got so used to during the last decade. So happy to answer any of your questions in Discord.
Thank you very much, JP. Just right in time. So encouraging everyone to join the Discord. We have a lot of viewers, so this is great. Thanks, JP. Very encouraging talk. And anyone, who wants to ask more questions, please join on Discord. Thanks, JP. Thanks for being with us.
See you on Discord.